Should be all good.
Thank you. Here is the preamble. Hello, and welcome to the February meeting of Chelsea Land Use. My name is Carrie Keenan, and Jessica Chait and I are the co-chairs of this committee, which usually meets monthly. As per the mayor's orders, we are still meeting remotely, and this meeting is being recorded and is currently live streaming on YouTube. The agenda for tonight is public and can be viewed on CB4's website. We encourage people to sign up for eBlast to get the agenda. If this is your first time at a CB4 meeting, there are some things to know about the process. After each presentation, first the committee will ask questions to the presenter, then members of the public can ask questions or make a comment. Subsequently, the discussion goes back to the committee. On some agenda items, committee members may next vote to make a recommendation, which usually results in a letter for the full board to vote on. If you want to comment or ask a question after a presentation and after the committee has spoken, you should please press the raised hand button on your screen and we will call on you to unmute, which is usually on the bottom right. And if you are calling in, use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Does anyone have any questions now about what I just shared? Great. Then we have quorum and we have 4 agenda items tonight and some new business things to discuss and some updates. So I don't know if everybody would like to introduce themselves. Mike, it's really nice to see you. Do you want to just say hi and then we'll pass the baton?
Yes, thank you. It's Mike Noble. I'm a committee member and I pass it to Betty. Hurry up now, Betty.
Good evening, Betty McIntosh. I live in Chelsea and I'm a committee member.
Thanks, Betty. Pamela?
I am Pamela Wolf. I live in Chelsea as well, and I'm a public member of this committee.
Thanks, Pamela. Paul?
Paul Devlin, former co-chair of Chelsea Land Use, now co-chair of Hell's Kitchen Land Use, as well as a member of this committee.
Thanks, Paul.
And I'll pass it. Do you want me to pass?
Sure. If you won't, I will.
Then I will pass to Tina.
Hello, my name is Tina. I live on West 26 between 6th and 7th.
Thanks, Tina. Dave?
I'm Dave Holoka. I live on 19th Street between 9th and 10th, and I'm a member of this committee.
Thanks, Dave. Marty?
Marty DeCott. I live in Penn South. Greetings, everybody.
Thanks, Marty. Mirinal?
Good evening, everyone. Member of the Chelsea Land Use and the WPE committee.
Thank you. Lowell?
Hi, I'm Lowell Kern. I'm a member of this committee and I can pronounce Tina's last name.
Thank you. Brad?
Good evening, Brad Pascarella. I live in Chelsea. Look forward to the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. And Jessica?
Good evening, everyone. Jessica Chait, co-chair of Chelsea Land Use and also on Housing, Health and Human Services and first vice chair of the board. Carrie introduced herself at the beginning, so I think we can just move to our first agenda here tonight, which is we're delighted to be joined by so many representatives of the Church of Holy Apostles at 296 9th Avenue. I'm going to ask this is regarding the installation of, I believe, 4 lampposts. Before you begin your presentation, if you can just go ahead and maybe do your own introductions. And actually, before we do that, I see we are now joined by Bert. Bert, we just did intros of our committee. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself? And then we'll kick it to our guests. Oh, you're on mute.
Hi everyone. I'm Bert Lasman, member of Chelsea Land Use and also co-chair of the Business License and Permits Committee of Community Board 4. Hi, everyone.
Okay, so we'll turn it. I don't know if Reverend Pearson, you want to start, but if we could just get everyone from the church so we know which squares we're looking at and who's whom, and then you can dive into your presentation.
Fantastic.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Pearson. I am the Executive Director of Holy Apostle Soup Kitchen and Rector of Church of the Holy Apostles. I've been in this position for almost 5 years now. Michael?
I'm Michael Raleigh. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Holy Apostles Soup Kitchen and Pantry. I've been with the church for 14 years. Steve.
Yeah, Steve.
Hi, I'm the owner's representative for the Soup Kitchen and Church of the Holy Apostles, and I'm glad to be here.
Betsy.
Hi, I'm Betsy Correa. I'm the lighting designer that was tasked with illuminating the church.
Matthew.
Hi, I'm Matthew Michalski from Michalski Studio. We're the architects, just sort of trying to spearhead the improvements at the church and at the soup kitchen. Christina?
Yes, hello. I'm Christina Redmond from Midtown Preservation, Architecture and Engineering, and we are restoration consultants, and we're assisting with the presentation materials for the lighting.
Is there anybody else?
I think that's everyone. I think Betsy's going to move forward with the main presentation.
Okay, great. Great, fantastic. And just on behalf of everyone at Holy Apostles, thank you for taking time to meet with us to hear this presentation. As you know, many of you were there when I spoke with Community Board a couple of months ago. This is for the purposes of lighting the exterior of our building, our beautiful landmarked building, and I know you're all familiar with it, whether inside or out or both. It is currently very dark on the corner of 28th and 9th. We want to remedy that. It is not just a question of aesthetics, it's also a question of security and comfort for the people who come to us in our warming center overnight, who come to us for space rentals, because in addition to a church and a soup kitchen, we're also a community center. There's a lot of activity that's going on all the time, 7 days a week throughout the year. So it is our hope that we will be able to celebrate all we do with the addition of exterior lighting for our beautiful building. And with that, I will turn it over. I think, Betsy, you're next.
All right, let me just get my screen pulled up so you can see the presentation. All right, can everyone see the screen? Okay, so we were hired to help with the illumination of the church, and as Reverend Pearson said, it's quite dark. It's actually somewhat ominous at nighttime, especially. It's this sort of monolithic structure that we really wanted to enhance and bring some life back to. Right now, it's obviously gone through, you know, a lot of restorations in the past, but the lighting has sort of fallen short. There's a lot of just missing bulbs or mismatched ones. And so what we wanted to do is really highlight the architecture, but we wanted to sort of, you know, do it in a universally designed way so that it doesn't look like we're just flashing light at the church or at your eyes if you're walking by. So the way that we wanted to present this was we wanted to use a pole, which we would mount a projector fixture to. And what this is going to do is highlight specifically the steeple of the church. We can do that by using projectors which have shutters on them, so we can aim precisely at what we want. We don't have to have any light spill that bothers the neighbors or that spills over the side of the building. So it's really a great architectural tool to light exactly what we want, and we can have it fairly precise. The objective here was to sort of combine, you know, the aesthetics with security lighting as well, because there is a lack of security lighting on the premises right now. So what we've done is we've coupled the pole with the projector light, as well as a security type of a fixture that can be you know, illuminated only whenever it senses motion at night. So there's going to be a photocell and a motion sensor built into the pole in the most sort of inconspicuous way. The poles themselves are 10 feet tall, and then the projector sits on top of that on a yoke mount, which is adjustable. We have these mounted in 3 corners of the property, and then one sort of tucked behind the church. You can see to the right where they are designated on plan. They're sort of just about 5 to 6 feet off of the fence line. So this would be, you know, mounted into the ground, and the projector would sit just on top. You can see on plan here in site view where they are in the north corner, the east and the south corner. And then the one at the back, which is a little bit more hidden behind the mission house. You can see here in section that it sits just about 5 or 6 feet off of the fence line, and that the security light, we can mount it anywhere along the pole, but really to get the projection we want, it really needs to be mounted about, you know, 8 feet or so off of the floor, off the ground. And then the projector again sits on top. So we did do a few mock-ups with a couple fixtures to see which one would be most effective, where we should place them to get the best angle. You know, obviously we have to keep in mind things like trees, and we want to be mindful of any kind of security lighting that may impede on, you know, foot traffic. We don't obviously want these going on and off all the time. So it'd really be just whenever it senses motion on someone on the property at night. The poles themselves, the projectors, would be set either on a timer or sort of photocell, so they would only come on certain hours of the night. So you can see the one behind the mission house there, and then the one here on the southwest corner is really kind of tucked kind of nicely almost against the trees there. This was the photos that we took during our mock-up. You can see this was a sort of a temporary installation. We actually did a sort of, you know, fixture on fixture mock-up. We have one on the left, one on the right, and the one on the right was a little bit more successful. The way that we were able to frame it and get the shutters to mount pretty much perfectly aligned with just a steeple. So you can see it's quite dark in comparison to the rest of the church. So once all of the sort of, you know, the new sconces are on and then this light is up, I think it'll look a lot more lively, and I think that it won't look so ominous. So that is our goal. And, you know, the finish of the pole is going to be in a matte black. So it will be, you know, pretty much disguised. It won't be anything too obtrusive. And dimming will be through a DMX protocol, which, you know, is a wireless system. So all of the controls will be easy to navigate. There'll be a button on a keypad inside somewhere that they can turn it on and off if they want. Or I can just stay on a photocell or a timer. So if anybody has any questions or
Could I interject a couple of points?
yeah, of course. Do you want me to go to a different slide?
No, you can leave it here. So this is part of this is one part of a like 4 to 5 layer lighting redesign for the site. This just happens to be the 20% that can't be approved at staff level at Landmarks Preservation Commission. All with the idea to enhance security lighting on the premises. But what's the sort of creativity that's in play here is that instead of just putting up a bunch of security lights, they're actually shining light at the church. And staff level approval has other examples of this where they're sort of bouncing light off the church walls, exterior church walls, so that it'll just sort of activate the whole corner without just being yard security lights that we can all point to and say oh well, there are those security lights. So I think we find it to be a creative solution to both enhance the church, but with the mind of activating that whole corner, the whole site, and creating some additional sense of security. So that's my two cents.
Matthew, could you speak to what some of those other, I understand that they're approved at the staff level, but what some of those other enhancements are and how this fits into the context of the work that I know the church is doing overall to update the facilities?
Sure. So they're like in more discrete locations where the lighting isn't quite as present to the public walking by. There's like true security lights illuminating entrances and stuff like that. There are some fairly unattractive fixtures mounted to the building, to the church itself. You can see on the left-hand image of the slide that's up in front of us. There's one to the right of the main entrance to the church. It appears that the one to the left, the bulbs are burned out. So the church has engaged an outfit to do 4 custom sconces that Midtown Preservation did a really deep dive into all the historical records and found some hazy images of what the original lighting might have been when it was installed, and they're making replicas of those lights with contemporary lamping, obviously. So there'll be 4 sconces mounted at the entry points of a historically accurate landmark sanctioned sconces. In addition to that, in the north yard, the grassy area to the north, there are some quite discrete fixtures that'll be located running the length of that facade, buried in the landscape, that'll bounce light off that facade, and again just create a sort of reflected, illuminated corner that will enhance security, but also in a I would argue it in a pleasing way, a sort of discreet way, and treat the building like the landmark that it is. Right, Betsy, is there another application that I'm forgetting?
No, my understanding is that there are just plans more broadly to make changes to the interior of the building, which is separate and not related necessarily to this application, but I know the church has those plans, and I thought this could just be within the context of overall improvements that are being made. But seeing as this is your presentation is for the purpose of LPC, we can leave it to the lighting and the changes that cannot be made at staff level at this time. We have some other hands, so we'll we'd love to hear from everyone on the committee and questions or thoughts on this project. And then if we have anyone from the community and from the public, we'll go to them. But we'll start with Lowell. I saw your hand up first.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I think the goals are good ones, and this appears to be tastefully done. The one thing you didn't address that I'd like to hear about, your location is smack dab in the middle of Penn South, and you come up against a lot of the Penn South buildings. I think there was one shot of the side/rear yard where you could see the terraces from Penn South, basically overlooking your backyard. Is this lighting going to, the additional lighting going to create any ambient light or issues for the Penn South residents? Have you looked into that? Did you hear anything while you were running the tests? Or is there any reason for Penn South residents to be concerned about this?
We were very mindful of this during the mock-up, as we usually are. We like to use this type of fixture for that exact reason, because we can frame out exactly what we want to light and what we don't want to light. So oftentimes we'll use these types of fixtures in art galleries and things and such, so we can get exactly precision. We didn't have any spill, we didn't have any complaints, and we didn't have any, any glaring issues when we were on site. And because of the angles and everywhere we need to be, that's sort of why we had to mount them precisely where we did, because if we ended up sort of either too front or too side of the building, you end up doing exactly that and kind of catching some glare where you really don't want it.
All right, thanks. That was my only issue.
Dave?
Thanks for the presentation. And, I'm really grateful for all that the church does for the community. I think it would be great if the steeple were lit up as kind of a symbolic beacon. And I share Lowell's concern about any impact on the residents of Penn South. And that said, I'm wondering if you could light more than just sort of the peak of the steeple, which is, it's not what distinguishes the steeple. It's like every church that has a steeple comes to an acute point like that. But the part that's immediately below it, that's in darkness in your views, is that's kind of unique. It's by an important 19th century architect, particularly of churches, named Menard Lefebvre. And as Paul Goldberg here has noted, the church kind of is its own style. It's a very inventive design, and I think it would be wonderful if that lower part of the steeple could be lit as well. Is that a possibility without impacting Penn South? That would be my first question. And then I'd want to know if there was any opportunity for solar power for this lighting.
Good question. So to answer your first part of your question, it can be done. When we did the mock-up, we were aiming more so on the top part of the steeple. There is interior lighting in the bell tower that's not turned on in this photo that does shine sort of through the windows there. And those round rose windows are also internally lit, which are not turned on in this photo. So there is some life up there. It's not going to be completely dark, completely black. We do have the ability to adjust the shutters of the fixtures. It would probably just take some, final mocking up to make sure that it's feasible, but it is possible. And then the second question for solar, while it's probably possible, it's not something that's been planned for or budgeted for, which I don't know if I'm the person to be able to speak about that, but it would probably be pretty costly to operate them in that way. They do not take a whole lot of power. They are LED fixtures, and while they are quite large fixtures for the capacity that we need, they're really only they're under a couple hundred watts each. So it's not like we're running your traditional metal halide or mercury vapor that's on the church now, which runs really hot, and they're only going to be running certain times of the night. So I don't see on an energy level sort of an issue, but I imagine it could be done. Maybe Matthew, you can speak to that, but I know it wasn't a budgeted.
Yeah, I think we'd have to get with the church and the various committees and look at the notion of solar. And to an earlier point there, the HVAC system, heating and air conditioning, is being totally revamped, a much more efficient system. That the insulation package for the church is being enhanced considerably. So they are committed to a lighter footprint, but we'll certainly note and discuss with the Reverend and Chief Operating Officer the idea of solar and see how see what options we have there.
Yeah, I'd encourage it. You know, the technology is certainly out there. Even light poles in shopping mall parking lots have individual solar collectors at the top. The technology is there. It should be pretty easy to check whether it's within your budget. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
John, I see your hand up. Zoners rep, did you want to respond to that specifically?
I think it would. I think it would be interesting, and we should see what a potential solar panel might look like. But one of the reasons that I think it wasn't pursued earlier is that we're trying to keep as historical look as we possibly can, and achieve at least the minimum effect that we can. So it's been a little difficult for us to find places to put certain things, and solar panels might be one of them. But I think we should look at it.
Great, thank you. Betty, we'll go to you and then Paul.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. And if you look at the slide on the left that is up there, I live right behind the church on the 17th floor. So every morning I get up and I see the steeple and I love it. And I think the lighting will only make it more beautiful at night. So I'm very big on this. I do have a sort of following up on Lowell. I heard the presentation that there will be shutters and on the light. I guess we'll just see how it turns out. That I won't see the light shining through when I'm in my bed at Penn South. So I guess I'll let you know if it's shining on my bed. But in general, I love this. And I wanted to know whether or not the applicant has contacted the building directly adjacent. You can see it as kind of a little white building that's behind it on the left slide, because they're very close to the church, and whether they will have any feedback on that. And also if you'd go onto the board of directors at Penn South and at least talk to them about this project. And then I was a little unclear about the motion light. It seems that the poles will be on the property of the church. And then I saw the early pictures, and when somebody, it's unclear if somebody walks by, does the light go on? It seemed like somebody said it doesn't, but then it's only somebody's on the church property that it triggers the motion light. So that's kind of my questions.
So let me go back to the slide that shows. So here you can see the illustration of the pole. To clarify, the security light is the smaller light aimed downward that's mounted on the pole, where the projector is the one on top. So the security flood will be on a separate circuit than the projector above. So we don't want it just turning on and off all the time, because that would happen a lot, being that it's a very busy street. So it's really meant to be aimed and focused in a way that if someone were to enter the property of the church and be walking anywhere around that vicinity of that pole, that security light will turn on once it senses motion at night. So it's not going to happen during the day. You know, like if a cat ran by, it's only going to be in that vicinity of that pole. So people walking by on the street, it's not going to trigger these lights. Sorry.
I personally, the corner is so dark that I was kind of rooting for it just to be turned on so that the sidewalk was lit, which is a whole other concept. So maybe you can play around with that, and it's not a motion situation, but it's just a light that lights up that corner because it's very dark in and of itself. And so, you know, maybe you can consider that. And I also, you could go back to the slide where it's the back of the church. And the photo with the back of the church, keep going there. Okay, so just so everybody knows, those balconies that you see from the red building, that's not Penn South, that's the 7-story building right behind. And you know, again, I think it'd be good if you spoke with the people and that live in that church live in that 7-story building. I see construction. Oh, I guess it was the mock-up that was going on. I saw the mock-up being built. So those are my issues, and I'm really when is this going to happen?
Well,
Yeah, we would present to as soon as it processes through your committee and through full CB4 committee. We would take that to landmarks, and nobody's more anxious than Dr. Anna and Michael, the chief operating officer, to keep whatever momentum we have, and so we would get on it right away. And there are grants involved with it that might expire, so we're committed to. There will be no delay as soon as all the necessary approvals are in place.
And talking to Penn South and to the adjacent neighbor?
We're in with the other improvements that are ongoing. We're in conversation with them frequently. And if this specific scope of the project hasn't come up, we'll be sure to raise it with them. But I'm confident in saying, sort of not like as a sort of a bit of a liaison, that based on the placement of the fixtures and the church and what they're doing, that there's really not a potential for. I promise you will not see the light fixtures when you wake up in the middle of the night. You will not see the light fixtures, but nor will the property to the west, to the east. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, could you maybe just speak to what the process would be if there were complaints? I mean, we're hopeful that there won't be, but I think if there are complaints, what will be the process for the church to address those and make any modifications?
Betsy, what do you think? We could move, we would do a new mock-up of a pole in a different position. But just given the proximity of that fence to the church, it's a fairly vertical application. So whereas if you drew the sight line from where the pole is to even the top floor of anything on Penn South, it's a much more it's a much shallower angle. But we would, if Dr. Anna, maybe you could talk to what the approach would be, but I would think we could move the poles, still do what we're trying to do, and avoid any light trespass to any adjacent neighbor.
Yes, absolutely. And I know Michael probably wants to weigh in on this too, but we are, again, given where we're located and the fact that there are so many buildings very close to the church building, we're in conversation with our neighbors all the time about everything that happens in the building. And of course, that commitment would continue with this specific project. It is not our intention to alienate the people around, and we really want to make the neighborhood better, enhance the neighborhood, as well as what's going on our property. So yes, the conversation will be ongoing, and we will do everything we can to be responsive as the project evolves and what's done.
Perfect, thank you. Paul, to you, and then Pamela.
Hi, everybody. Just at the outset, full disclosure, I am on the advisory council for the Holy Apostle Soup Kitchen. I don't see this as a direct conflict, but I will be voting P&E on this issue. But I have a question about what exactly it is that we're being asked to approve from a landmarks perspective. Is it because light is being thrown onto the landmark building, or are we because of the posts on the landmarked property? What exactly is it that we are approving or voting on? I'm not saying approving, we're voting on.
Christina, you can probably best speak to that, right?
Yeah, it's basically just the language and the landmarks rules. You know, they have you know, previous applications where they've approved sconces, they've approved like you know, small wall washers and whatnot. But because these are posts on the property and the whole property is landmarked, and the posts are we're not like reinstituting something that was there, you know, from the 1900s. It's a new type of feature. So that's part of the reason. It just didn't comply with all of the written language and the landmarks rules.
So it's technically the posts that we're approving, not the light onto the building itself. And that the solar panel, if we were to investigate solar panels on top of those posts, that would alter the posts significantly enough that would you have to come back with that revision, or would landmarks then look at the posts as acceptable, and if you added solar panels later, they would approve that at a staff level? Do you have any insight on that?
So I think again, I don't know how we could serve these with solar panels, if it's something actually that has to be on the post, if it can be on the ground. But there's a possibility that if they implemented the solar panels on the post and it were conspicuous enough, we would have to come back to the community again. I can't say for sure. The idea is that, you know, once these features presented to you now are approved and we get full community board approval, we can present to the commissioners at landmarks and obtain their approval. Yeah, so I can't say for sure about the solar panels, but as a side note, it's my understanding, and I may be speaking optimistically, that Con Edison is eventually moving to you know, other alternatives for energy, and hopefully the whole grid will be clean someday. But
that is nice for all of us at some point in the distant future. I agree. So then, as a follow-up to that, do you have any established precedent of other LPC applications that were requesting posts being put onto landmarked property that we could refer to as positive or negative affirmation to this application?
I don't, you know, I could get that from the historian. Yeah, I don't have examples.
Okay. All right, no, that's I was just trying to get clarity on what exactly it is that we're approving, voting on. So thank you for that.
It's not the lighting itself. It's just the pole that's in the yard. Like like they were asking if we could have done this discreetly without having to see the pole, it would have been staff level. But because the pole is in the yard and the public will experience the pole, and we've had. I mean, Christina, you've had a couple of discussions with them, like face-to-face meetings where they've altered the design of it. So this is a tailored design to what precedent says they can approve. If it.
Yeah, the issue is not so much the illumination of the steeple. The illumination of the steeple would normally be approved at staff level. It's the fact that there are posts in the yard, and illuminating the steeple in other manners would be cost prohibitive, and it would be very difficult to maintain it just due to the height and trying to get equipment up to that height. If a lamp should break, it's an astronomical expense to try to get a boom lift truck or scaffolding up to that location to try to fix it or maintain it. So here it's, you know, it's far enough from the pedestrians, but at the same time, you know, they can reach it from, you know, low rise scaffolding or ladders or whatnot if they need to maintain it.
Sorry to interrupt, but I can answer Paul's question. The New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue needed to get Landmark's approval for its lighting system, its exterior lighting system, which included exterior poles, lighting mounted on the building. They weighed in on things, including the color of the poles. And I think they may have even gotten a little out of their bailiwick and weighed in on the lighting scheme itself, but that's one example.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, Dave. All right, we'll go let's try to kind of pick up the pace here since it's already 7:15. Pamela to you, and then Brad. Okay, Mike.
Well, hi, thank you. What a beautiful church that is. First off, I'm curious to know, I see that there's a street lamp, a city street lamp at the south end, I think it is, on 9th Avenue. But is there no street lamp on the corner, the actual corner? And if not, why not? And why don't we get after DOT to put one there? It might be a big help. Another question I had is the columns themselves look pretty stark, black, and I assume a matte black maybe, but not in any way contextual with the building itself. Was there any consideration, and I know this has got to be a financial burden, but for using columns that are more in suiting more toward the historic reference of, for example, Chelsea columns, which are often 10 feet tall, cast iron columns that are on buildings around the neighborhood still from the 1880s and 1900s. Just wondered about that. From the angle of the fixtures themselves, they're very wonderful fixtures that you're used to seeing in a proscenium theater, and with the shutters on them. And I know that you can be very, very precise in the direction of the light. It looks to me like the fixtures on the west side of the church, if they're almost vertical, couldn't be of any problem for Betty for sleeping, and the ones on the east side will be facing west, presumably, or northwest and southwest. So I don't see a problem with lighting for the Penn South residents or the adjoining building. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I could probably speak a little bit about the design of the post, but Betsy would need to chime in at some point. So we discussed the post with the landmarks historian, and being that the projector is kind of like a modern feature, we felt that using like a historic design of the post might kind of be mismatched, and I think from landmarks perspective, if you don't have like a specific historical feature that you're replicating, and it doesn't look to be historically true or accurate, sometimes they prefer simplicity at the sake of overcomplicating.
I can understand that.
That was the reasoning. I don't know if you have any other comments, Betsy.
We certainly did look back and forth at different options for aesthetic purposes. Like there are, you can mount the projector off of an arm as opposed to on top. Ideally, it's better this way because it actually is less obtrusive this way, because the pole has to be sort of almost counterbalanced. Otherwise, it'll be heavy. So you'd have to have sort of, this other arm with the security flood on one. And so we did a lot of back and forth with this. And I think the simplicity is what ended up winning, just because we were trying to make it, less obtrusive than what it feels like it was. So, I mean, we could certainly, the pole certainly comes in any RAL finish you want, or textural finishes. You could certainly add some things to it, but yeah, I think in this case it's probably better if it just maybe stays plain, so it goes away.
I understand. Was there any consideration given to coloring it perhaps architectural bronze or something that would be a little more appropriate for the brownstone of the church? Back is pretty dark.
I think it's adjacency to the gate. Gate was, we were color and texture of the gate was landmarks sort of like that proximity better than hearkening on a color or texture further away at the church.
Last quick question. These lights are going to be the vertical lights on the steeple. Are they going to come on at dusk and go off at dawn, or are they a part of the off and on effect? Are they only on some part of the time, or is this for every night?
Yes, correct. It would be dusk to dawn. So this would be on like a photo cell or a timer. Yes, they won't come on and off.
Okay, I look forward to seeing it from a distance. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Brad?
Pam, that's why I love having you here. You took all my questions. I think this, the Lord said, let there be light. So I'm not voting against anything, but I do think it looks a bit plain. I think it should have some fluting. I think the top should have some type of area that could have this piece inside. That's one thing. My other question is, do these light posts bark? Because we don't want to have a problem. That's an inside joke. Also, on the ground to put them in, is anything being disrupted related to landmarks on the ground? Meaning the stonework or anything like that to make these connected? And my last question is low voltage related security cameras. Are they going to be mounted on this? How's that going to look? Thank you. Oh, and is this going to be like a movie projector where there's a sharp stripe of light going straight up, or will it be more diffused? Thank you.
Okay, I didn't do a great job taking down all those points, but no straight light up. It'll focus on the steeple itself. There is some paving that's coming up, some historical bluestone paving that's coming up just immediately in front of the church. That will be lifted and put back in its original state. Yeah, I appreciate your brevity, Brad, but those were the only 2 points that I remember. What else do I need to speak to?
I just think it does look a bit stark, and I don't. Right. I think one point is I understand the black. I'm fine with the color. You know the old lights that they have with the bell on the bottom, the flute coming up, and this thing has the top right on it, which could be adjusted, could be modified. That's all I'm suggesting.
Total.
I understand cost too, but that was something to talk about.
Yeah. No, that was my my initial reaction too, just as a sort of quasi outsider to critique this. So I had them put part of another part of the pole on top to kind of like give it some termination, and Landmarks was like, no, we like, despite what we all say tonight, Landmarks would have rejected it for that. So this is a sort of a negotiated solution with I mean, I don't know what they would say if you said it had to have a top to get a positive vote, but we had it on there and they took it off. It's a nuanced organization, and this is a sort of negotiated settlement, if you will.
Yeah, well, we deal with them. We understand the nuance that sometimes we don't understand on our end. The lights, are they going to change color? So St. Patty's Day, is it going to go green? Like, is it on an LED? Is it going to go
only
purple?
when the
For
Only when the
Cancer
Eagles-
Week, I'm just wondering.
Only when the Eagles win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you don't
Right.
want to go there, Matthew, not if you want this approved.
Sorry.
And we do want to bring
Can-
this.
can we vote?
discussion- Yeah, we do need to bring this discussion to a close, but we have not heard from Mike, who has his hand up. So Mike, if you can make it brief.
Yeah, well,
Well, hold on.
everybody's.
I wanted to, hold on. I meant seriously, are there going to be colored lights?
No.
I don't want to move on.
No,
No.
they're not RGBW. However, if you really wanted to add color, you could add a film of some type of color if you wanted just a color, a wash of color.
So it's
Like-
not
like-
LEDs that can change.
No.
These are not RGBW. No, it's just a static white.
Thank you.
Brad, Mike?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, all my questions have been asked and answered, except I wanted to say that Betty's thought about having more light in general on the sidewalk is how I interpreted this application when I first saw it. My thought was that there would always be light there, more light there on the sidewalk. And I take it the northeast corner does not have a street lamp, right? And it would be nice if there was constant lighting in that area. That's kind of a dark spot. And the folks who walk around there at night, are people that you might want to keep an eye on in general.
Thanks,
Would
Mike.
you-
I think what we're hearing, and we can put this back to the church, is separate from this proposal and your discussions with the local residents of Penn South and the neighboring buildings. If you can discuss what additional lighting requests people have so that we can ensure that there is public safety, top of mind, and then you can come back to us with other, hopefully those won't require perhaps landmarks discussions, but there was a suggestion of working with DOT or others to ensure ample lighting on the street corner. We would really like to wrap this up, seeing as we're almost at an hour. Dave, I see your hand is up again. Did you have something new you wanted to add? You're on mute. But maybe you took your hand down. Okay. All right. I cannot make a motion, but to summarize, I'm hearing that we are generally in favor of these lampposts, that we'd like to see a design that takes into consideration more of the historic elements of the church, and perhaps a design that does a better job of harkening back to the current fabric of the church in its area. That we would ask that you continue to maintain communication with the residents, not just in leading up to the design, but also once the project hopefully is approved and up, and that we would request that you explore the opportunity of solar power, or in some ways bringing in green elements to this addition.
And would you mind taking your presentation off the screen so we can see the committee? Sorry. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Carrie.
Jessica, I'm not sure we've asked if there's anybody from the public who wants to speak on this.
Thank you. If anyone does want to speak from the public, please raise your hand and Jesse will bring you over.
I'm not seeing anybody.
Okay, is there someone who would care to make a motion or add to what I put out there?
So moved.
Second,
You, all those in favor?
aye.
All those opposed? All those present not eligible?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. We will present this at the full board. Is that next week already? Next week. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Holy Apostles, for your great work and for your open communication with the community. We very much appreciate it.
And thank you for your support in our ongoing commitment to serve the community.
Thank you.
Thank you,
right.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
We're going to move to our next presentation or our next discussion. I believe that is our Public Bathroom Task Force to present a proposed amendment to privately owned public spaces known as POPs. I'm gonna turn that to Paul, who's been spearheading this with Hell's Kitchen Land Use. I think Julie is here as well. So go ahead, Paul.
Thanks, everybody. I don't know if I'm necessarily spearheading so much as shuttling through the committees. And Julie too is here, who is a member of the Public Restrooms Working Group. And Viren is also a member of that working group. Was there a presentation? Julie, were you going to make the presentation on the zoning text amendment? Okay, yes. So just so everybody knows, there is a possibility this working group of people from 5 different community boards are drafting a zoning text amendment, which would require public restroom facilities at POPs, publicly owned private spaces. And so we're going to hear about their thoughts and then have a discussion about what within the zoning text amendment that they're proposing. Since it is a citywide zoning text amendment, we have unique concerns here in our district. So want to make sure that any concerns we have are addressed in the citywide zoning text amendment. So with that, I'll turn it over to Julie.
Thanks, Paul. We also have Renee Kinsella from CB5 in the audience. I don't know if you could make her part of the panel so she can jump in.
Yeah, I'll bring her over right now.
Okay.
Julie, I know we have your deck, but before you jump into that, and I know Paul mentioned it briefly, but I know when I learned about this initially, there was some confusion about where this is coming from and those 5 boards that were part of the working group. Can you just set some context before we dive into the specific issue?
Sure. So I actually put together a public bathroom report in 2019 with the Urban Design Forum. This is the image of the book. And from then, CB5 and CB1 got together to start a public bathroom working group. And since then, we've had CB4, CB6, CB7 join, as well as CB2 Queens. And we've been just having stakeholder calls and different suggestions for the different bathroom types. And last year, we were focusing on the intros that the Manhattan Borough President proposed. And then this year, we're pushing on POPs, and there's some other ideas on the board. I don't know if that's sufficient.
Great.
So I'm going to present some data from this report and just tell you a little bit about our public bathroom system in New York City before diving deeper into the zoning text amendment that we're proposing. This full screen. So we have 1,100 public bathrooms in New York City. So that's a 8.5 million with 60 million annual tourists pre-pandemic, as well as Midtown experiences 900,000 people per acre during the workday pre-pandemic. So it's not enough, and only 2 of them are available 24/7. So this results in a high concentration of public urination complaints, especially in Midtown. So over a period of 10 years, it was almost 400,000 311 complaints were recorded. And then we have a map here of zoomed in focus on Midtown. So in the pink and purple are the 311 complaints near our transportation hubs along 5th Avenue. And the green and yellow you see are 311 calls regarding homelessness. And this is superimposed on locations of public bathrooms in Midtown. And then looking at CB4, we did put together a website of the 1,100 public bathrooms. And you have roughly 18 public bathrooms. And these are the different types of bathrooms included in that count. Not all the MTA station bathrooms have been reopened since the pandemic. I think 9 just reopened in January. And then I know CB4 also got some new bathrooms with Moynihan Station, as well as I think Little Island was open after 2019. And then public bathrooms is a hot topic these days with our public health crisis that we just experienced, but the governor and the mayor recently released a new New York plan back in December where they're focusing on commercial revitalization in Manhattan. And one of their goals is to make the public realm, Midtown's public realm, one of the world's best places. And we believe public bathrooms is should be part of that goal. Jumping into the public bathroom system, Parks makes up one of our biggest public bathroom component, about 662 comfort stations out of 1,700 parks. So less than half of our comfort stations, more than half of our parks are not fully accessible to all users. And the two images are showing public-private partnerships in MCB4, where your private funding as well as a private group is managing and maintaining the bathrooms. And this is important to know since we're talking about POPs tonight, how important public-private partnerships are. Comptroller Scott Stringer back in 2019 published their discomfort station report, citing 400 issues of damaged fixtures, hazardous conditions. And one of the intros that was proposed last year by Manhattan Borough President was accountability for these bathrooms and requiring parks to publish updates every 6 months. That has not passed yet. And then the other thing to note is that DC has a bill out right now requiring parks that are larger than 1 acre to require public bathrooms. So some things to think about for our parks bathrooms. And then with MTA subway stations, out of 472 MTA stations, we have 78 bathrooms. And all of these closed during the pandemic. And as I was saying, 9 of them reopened in January. And a lot of these are also not in the greatest condition. 34th Street, Hudson Yards, of course, it's a new station, so the bathrooms are really nice there. But also focus on public-private partnerships. The 42nd Street Times Square station was built by Boston Properties. They rebuilt the station in 1990 when they were constructing their tower. And at that time, the community asked them for full-time attendance. So since 1990, Boston Properties has been paying Times Square Alliance $100,000 a year to provide full-time attendance. So this keeps the bathroom safe, secure, and clean. These are the 4 bathroom stalls for those that are not familiar with these bathrooms. And then the attendant sits in this station back here. And our public bathroom system is also made up of our transportation hubs, which now includes Moynihan Train Hall, and then 5 automated public toilets. So the automated public toilets is part of the street furniture deal that Bloomberg brokered in 2006. So SAMUSA pays the city $1.2 billion and provides 3,000 bus stops, 300 newsstands, and 20 automated public toilets in exchange for advertising rights. So after 16 years, only 5 of those have been installed across the city. You can see them spread out. And 15 of them are still in warehouses today, with 4 years left to the contract. And this is really unfortunate because J.C. Decaux, who took over the contract, would install and maintain these bathrooms for free. And then our library system provides public bathrooms. We've included NYPD stations here, municipal buildings, public buildings should be included in this count. And then we have our privately owned public spaces. So out of 550 POPs, only 14 of them include public bathrooms right now. This is the list of those bathrooms. There's an extra one because CP5 in December asked one of the POPs to provide a public bathroom. They were able to open up their hotel bathroom in the building to our district, to the city. And that would be a new 24/7 bathroom in Midtown. So that was a big win for us. Our land use committees at CB5, we've been asking developers coming to us for POPs recertification for access to public bathrooms. Sometimes we get a win. I think 550 Madison is also in our district where we asked for bathrooms, and now we have a brand new gender neutral bathroom there. One thing to note about this list is that all of these bathrooms are adjacent or located in indoor POPs or enclosed public spaces. And I imagine the reason why is because it's easier to provide a bathroom when you're basically inside the building. I think one of them is an outdoor bathroom, but we'll take a look at that later. And then also some of these bathrooms, these plazas are smaller in size. There's a 7,000 square feet plaza here and a 3,000 square feet plaza, just to keep it in mind when we look at the proposed text amendment.
Julie, do you mind if I pause you there for 1 second? Just to point out to everybody that chart's difficult to read, but of the 14 POPs that have public restrooms, only one of them is in our district, and that's at Worldwide Plaza and Hell's Kitchen. Just to give you context. Thank you.
Sure. I have photos of that one, so we'll take a look at it closer later. So this is a chart of how many POPs were built over the years. And one question people have asked is how many new POPs will there be? How many bathrooms would be generated by this proposal? Just doing some quick research, I know East Midtown rezoning in our CB5 district, they say that would generate 16 new POPs over 10,000 square feet. So I'm not sure about Hudson Yards and how CB4 looks like, but something to discuss. We also wanted to note that POPs come to the board for recertification every 3 years. Not all POPs comply. In fact, Comptroller Scott Stringer also did another report where in 2017, where about half of our POPs aren't in compliance. So making older POPs comply with newer regulations is can be a hurdle. And then here's the history of POPs where requirements have been added throughout the years over different decades, from planters and seating to the recent one, which included signage regulations. And then these are the POPs precedents. So this is at 550 Madison, and this is the new gender neutral bathroom that we got in our district, CB5, which is in an enclosed area under the hill here. And then 645 Fifth Avenue, basically, this is a covered pedestrian space, but basically indoor POPs. And the bathroom is located here right next to the sitting area. And you can see the bathroom signage here. And then 875 Third Avenue, this is a POPs that has a large atrium with food provided on different floors. And pre-pandemic, we visited this, and you can see the sign on the bathroom. Please present photo ID if you wish to use the bathroom, and see for access, see guard. And here at 120 Park Avenue, the bathroom is located behind this nondescript wall. The signage, you can't tell if this bathroom is part of the POPs or not. And then also please see security for admittance. And lastly, this is the one in CB4, 825 8th Avenue. So this is a large plaza, outdoor plaza, and then there's a arcade around the perimeter at the base of the building. So you can see the entrance to the arcade here. and the bathroom is located right off the exterior space. So these are different bathroom types, and the next step would, you see some bathrooms located inside the building or part of the building itself. We haven't seen any precedent where there's a freestanding bathroom in the plaza. But that's something to think about because CB5 was looking at citing the automated public toilets next to POPs, the POPs that were generated in the 1960s, where there wasn't a lot of requirements and the plaza is really open. We were trying to use some of the clearance needed for APTs within the POPs. So you can see the red lines are the proposed location for APTs, locating it next to the POPs Plaza. So a next step would be, if a developer would be interested, is actually locating an APT within their plaza, and this would be easier on them instead of building their own bathroom. In that, JC Deco would provide the unit for free, install a unit, and maintain the unit for free. So in the actual zoning text amendment, under section 37-748 additional amenities, currently the zoning resolution requires public plazas greater than 10,000 square feet and associated with a commercial building to include food service as one of the 3 additional required amenities. So that's where we saw the segue to create a requirement for public bathrooms, because food and bathrooms, there's a relationship there. So the red text is what our proposed text, where public plazas greater than 10,000 square feet and associated with a commercial building to include access to a public restroom. And we say access to a public restroom because that could be a restroom that's already inside the building that they're willing to open to the public. And then for plazas that are less than 10,000 square feet, that includes a food amenity, we would like to ask for access to a public bathroom in that condition. And then lastly, because all the precedent bathrooms right now are enclosed or covered POPs, that we're suggesting that indoor POPs cover pedestrian space, enclosed public space, and cover plazas to include access to a public restroom. So, so we went back to the kiosk and open air cafe zoning sections and added that requirement or proposal where if there's a food kiosk or open air cafe, to include access to a public restroom. And then we're proposing a separate section on public restrooms within the public plaza zoning section, where we spell out the requirements for signage and operation. We would want to include a POPs logo so that people would know that the bathroom is part of the POPs and that it states clearly that's open to the public. And then all POPs are required to provide an information plaque listing the required amenities. So if a public restroom is included, that we would want it listed on the information plaque. So that's the zoning text proposal. Right now, CB1 has passed a reso, as CB5 passed theirs a couple of weeks ago.
So I can. But that was the end. That was the end of your presentation, right, Julia?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just jump in here and remind folks that what this is a zoning text amendment proposal. This is the draft language that has come out of the working group. As Julie said, other community boards have started to make their recommendations. Our process so far is we will be issuing a joint letter, technically through executive committee, with input from Hell's Kitchen Land Use and Chelsea Land Use. Because it's 2 committees, the executive committee will be the one to present it to full board for a vote. A lot of other issues came up in terms of how to solve the public restroom concerns, things like giving access to private retailers or all these things. And so at this point, the working group is just focusing in on this one issue of how do we require public restrooms at POPs. There are other solutions out there in the world, but this is just what we're focused on. There was a letter, a draft letter written already from the notes from Hell's Kitchen Land Use. It's in the Dropbox, so you can all see it. But I thought what might be helpful is if I kind of read through very quickly what the issues that were raised at Hell's Kitchen Land Use. So they're already in the letter the board will be, the executive committee will be approving. So if we can get some, if there's people that have other concerns besides what was raised at Hell's Kitchen Land Use, let's try to focus in on those. So very quickly, the issues that were raised at Hell's Kitchen were that we want to make sure that the maintenance of the POPs includes the new restrooms as well as the other parts of the space. Currently, POPs are maintained by the owner, but we want to make sure the restroom specifically is included in that language. We wanted to make sure that directional signage should be within the POPs as well as at the entrance, because sometimes the entrance is farther away and we want to be able to give better navigation. There was a question about occupation load, like how many toilets are needed in these things, depending on the volume of traffic in these plazas and POPs. So we wanted some better definition, specifically for indoor versus outdoor venues with consideration to other uses that occur within a plaza. We want to make sure that we incorporate language to address public safety concerns. Here in our district, POPs have a problem with some public safety issues, and how that's maintained, how that's controlled. We want to make sure those issues are addressed. This zoning text amendment focuses on POPs that are 10,000 feet or larger because they have kiosks and food cafe requirements. So this is an additional part of that language. We want some consideration made to smaller POPs that maybe don't have a food kiosk requirement, but maybe we still could insert a public restroom. Julie touched on this issue. We want to really highlight this is POPs come in for recertification all the time. We want the public restrooms discussion on to be part of a recertification. So somebody may have developed a POP in the POPs in the earlier long ago. Now, when they come in for recertification, this may be an opportunity to have public restrooms developed. And then our final point was that, and this is more about Hudson Yards, we often have in our POPs public space requirements. And what happens is the developers come along and put buildings in and water fountains and things like that, and it detracts from the actual open space component. And so we wanted to make sure consideration was given to the structures diminishing open space. So those are the things from Hell's Kitchen. So I'd like to open it up then for other comments. I see Bert and Brad have hands up. So Bert.
Yeah, this seems like a lot of work has been put into this committee, and I very much appreciate it. I haven't been able to absorb it all, but I have a very basic question, and I don't know if anybody has made an estimate. If we have approved some kind of change in the zoning resolution initially, we're talking about 10,000 square feet or more with a food amenity, how many more facilities would be created by this?
Yes, CB5 asked the same question, and on the Mass website, they have the database of POPs, and if you look at, you check food amenities, 25 POPs show up.
This is in CB4 now I'm talking about.
No, CB5 had your same question, but if you look at the Mass website of the 550 POPs, you click on food amenity, only 25 POPs provide food amenity apparently, which was surprising to me.
But that 25 is a broader geographic area than what I'm asking about.
That's total POPs out of 550 POPs.
So we don't really know. Do we really have any sense, Paul, the CB4 area?
I have not heard.
Not many, right?
I have not heard any forecasts as to how many public restrooms this would create if this rule were put into place. But I do, as I pointed out during the slide presentation, there's only one public restroom of the 550 POPs across the city. Right. There's only one in our district.
Yeah.
That has a public restroom. So even if they put in one more for it, that doubles the capacity in CD4.
Yes, I could do the math.
And 3 would triple it. But Julie, I think that's an interesting question. Is what would be the possible ramifications of this zoning text amendment, what would be the resulting number of public restrooms available within the community districts? Brad? Oh, go ahead, Julie. Do you have an answer for that?
I don't, but I do want to mention that we have reached out to DCP for a meeting. So hopefully they could help us with some of these questions.
If you could include that question, then Julie, that'd be great. Thanks. Brad?
Yeah, tremendous work. I just paused to the letter with Hell's Kitchen, a lot of good points there. One thing I saw in the presentation that was disturbing, it looked like a pour door to me, must show ID. That should not be a part of any of this. That's inappropriate, and that should be in our letter, in my opinion. I also think, we're focusing on 10,000 square feet. You know, if we're going to make a text amendment, we should call it 5. And then also, to the presenter's point, they're not complying. So I don't know, Paul, if a text amendment could have a fine put in if it's not complied within a certain amount of time, and not just 50 grand, 25 grand, something that actually these guys will want to put in a bathroom if it's $1 million. You know what I mean? Like literally put a big number in so this gets done and the property managers comply, and a way to, how do they, in our note, we could say, well, how is this monitored besides every 3 years?
So Brad, you're suggesting a fine be instituted for recertification. If someone comes in for recertification, we insist on the public restroom, and if they don't agree, then there's a fine.
That's correct. Or they show that they submitted the DOB to do the work, or they don't have one. You know how these things go, Paul.
Yeah.
They'll be like, well, for 15 years, we didn't do it. There's nothing slapping on their wrists because they don't want the people in there. Let's just be real. Yeah. And I think it's a problem. And the only way things get done if they get a massive fine. And I don't know if you can put that in the text amendment. And I tell you what, if there's a big fine involved, you bet that, the comptroller's office is going to want to get that money. So I just think, that type of component. I also sent Jesse, I don't know if he could pull it up, a picture of a bathroom that they use in London, and it pops out of the ground during like Broadway shows coming out. It comes up and it's literally a urinal with a slide door. There was an accident on one. That's why it was in the paper, and that's why I saw it. But I think there's got to be a bit more. I also want to put in there, if they don't comply, then they must have a temp setup. When I was in London, they had temp setups. So either they kind of look like mini containers, and they were, unisex bathrooms, and they were being maintained, but they were still temporary. So if these guys aren't getting done, they got to get a temporary one put in. We don't want them to say, well, it's 10 years and I don't have the infrastructure and I can't get to the sewer line and I can't get the water. These are all hurdles that do take time, but you know what? You got to put a temporary solution in there. Thank you.
Brad, thanks for that. In terms of the 10,000 versus 5,000, I think we're in agreement, and Hell's Kitchen raised the same issue. The reason that we're looking at 10,000 is because the current zoning text calls for food kiosks or cafes in pops that are 10,000 square feet or greater. So adding a restroom to a 10,000 square foot pop that already has a requirement for food would be a more natural place to add in a restroom. But we're in agreement, I think, Brad, that even smaller pops, if they don't have a food requirement, should still have a public restroom requirement. And then my reaction to the temporary thing, and I have been in London in those temporary urinals, the temporary becomes permanent. So I'm hesitant to say put in something temporary because that becomes the permanent solution for them. Viren, by the way, was on this working group, correct, Viren? So you might have some great insight, and after Viren will be Betty.
Paul, I just want to make a point. That's why we had the fine there. We can't just let them get off the hook. Sorry. Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, Viren.
No, Paul, many of these points have been covered actually in the task force conversation as well as my email that I sent earlier on. Going back to this 10,000 versus 5,000, Julie, we discussed that, occupancy load should be the consideration and not the size. And I think the size triggers the sort of for food kiosk. I think those two are not related. So either we go for a smaller size of POPs, 5,000, or irrespective of the size, based on the occupancy load, POPs should be required to provide public toilets. That's number one. Second thing that, we talk about recertification all the time in New York City. A lot of compliance arguments change depending on changed circumstances. For example, the city is going to require everyone to decarbonize, for example, right? So when we do decertification for POPs that were built 20 years ago or 15 years ago, they should comply to the new current standards that require them to have public toilets, whether it's 5,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet without a restroom. They should be required to provide public toilet to get certified, because that's the new, I don't know how a city would structure that in terms of a regulation, but that should be required for them to comply with. The last thing that I want to actually suggest is, I think I'm losing my train of thought. But those 2 points are the main 2 points I think we should definitely consider.
So occupancy load should drive the determination of a public restroom, not square footage. And nobody should be grandfathered when recertifying. If they come for recertification, whatever the rules are, they have to then abide by the new rules. No grandfathering of old POPs.
Absolutely, yes.
I love that expression, by the way, old POPs. I just feel like I'm talking to my grandfather or something. Betty.
Yes, thank you. First, it's a wonderful report. I don't know exactly who wrote it, but all the background data and all the, I love maps and, it's all there. Now, I don't really have a recommendation for the POPs text amendment, so forgive me for a minute. I was thinking about Chelsea when I was looking at the information, and how we're like a bathroom desert in Chelsea. And you've got in Hell's Kitchen, you've got that World Plaza place, okay. But then I was thinking if we could at some point think ahead more, where could public bathrooms be? Like, for instance, the clinic and in building in Chelsea between 28th and 27th, I think. And with the park behind it, where people are talking about having a dog park there, taking over the, whatever it is, racquetball or something, space, that maybe Community Board 4 could start advocating for public bathrooms, for instance, in 1 or 2 of our parks, because I don't see any POPs coming along in the near future. So that's just sort of a sidebar comment. Thank you.
Yeah, Betty, that is a great point. And something we also discussed quite extensively in Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee was that, a lot of other possibilities exist, like the public school systems. There are public schools that we should have access to, police stations, libraries, community, like all sorts of other options exist out there. Parks, public, all of that should be included. But this particular thing is just to focus in on the POPs. But I agree that whenever we're looking at any new dog park, we should have a public urinal. Yes.
Sorry, Paul, can
People would object to that? No, I don't. So,
I just wanted to respond to the, I think it's important to note that there is a time-sensitive legislation that passed in December or November of last year, where DOT and DPR are putting together sites for every zip code in the city for a public bathroom. And the bill says they're supposed to complete it within 1 year. Now, our district manager says that's likely not going to happen, but CB4 should let DPR and DOT know your preferred sites so that it could be included and considered when they're making this study or report.
Viren, is your hand still up or they come back up? And then Mike is after Viren.
No, I remember the point that I completely forgot. Julie, we discussed, I don't know exactly if this is the right place or not, but gender-free toilet or single occupancy toilet in parks. Can we add that to a text amendment?
If we can, I don't know if we can add it to our zoning text amendment, Julie. We did talk, there is, I know that in Vera, and you can verify this yourself, is that there were conversations held with the working group about gender neutral facilities and how that comes out. But I don't know if that got into the zoning text amendment itself. Julie, did you have a response?
Well, I think there's a local law that passed on gender neutral requirement. So if you provide a public bathroom, you have to provide gender neutral unit.
That was my understanding. Julie, you're right. That was my understanding. I wasn't quite sure if it will be interpreted properly by whoever the developer is. You know what I mean? Sometimes you need to spell it out. Even when we know that there's another law that covers it, since we are asking for it, might as well include that.
I think that's a good point because public bathrooms are not required in the plaza. So we don't know if DOB, a building code, and local law is triggered when there's a gray situation here.
Great. All right. Viren, I'll include that. Mike Noble?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, there are other places where public restrooms exist. In my neighborhood, we've got the Chelsea Recreation Center, which is part of parks. We've got the Chelsea Park, right? Which is a block over 26th Street. I assume we've got that. Are there any places like the Hudson Guild that are in an area that I don't see denominated necessarily in your data sheet there? Have you guys looked around at other places that are indeed,
So Julie, I think the question is about like more quasi-public spaces.
Yeah.
Aren't necessarily part of, and as a matter of fact, Julie, on the map, I noticed that I know in my block, Matthews Palmer Playground has a public restroom, and playgrounds are technically different than parks. And so some of the playgrounds, I noticed on the map, my public restroom on my block is not on your map. So there may be some additional information out there that you haven't identified yet that might be added in. And right. These quasi-public places that Mike is mentioning.
Yeah, but most of these playgrounds are within the purview of the Parks Department.
But Mike, I don't need to debate that.
No.
But yeah, it's not.
And I just want to remind us that we're specifically looking tonight on the text amendment. And so there is a working group on this, and people should feel free to email Paul and Viren, who have been participating in that, and Julie and Renee directly to give feedback, but we're really focused on the zoning text amendment language for tonight's meeting. And we still have several more items on our agenda this evening.
And I think the ultimate is we're either voting to approve the letter that Paul wrote to move on from Chelsea Land Use to full board or exec rather, which it sounds like we are all in favor.
Yeah. So, but Hector raised his hand, he took it down. Hector, did you have one more comment? And then okay. So Carrie, yes, that is exactly what I was as soon as Hector was done, I was gonna say the same thing. So there is a draft letter in the Dropbox that summarizes all that went on. I'm going to add additional points that no ID should be required to access these restrooms. We should institute fines for non-compliance. We should look at occupancy load rather than square footage. Recertification should not be grandfathered, and we should include gender neutrality specifically in this language. So Jess, do you want me to call roll on this? Is there a motion to accept the adoption of the letter with the addition of these items? Viren recognized as first, Tina second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any PNE? Motion passes. The letter will go to executive. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Julie. I just want to say that we're going to follow up, if you don't mind, I'm going to follow up with you on how we can, maybe you can send us the information on how we can suggest locations for Chelsea and more locations for Hell's Kitchen in what you mentioned before. Thank you.
And Julie, just to clarify, is this going to Borough Board or is this going to Mark Levine? Who do we write to?
We have a public bathroom meeting next Thursday. We're going to talk about how to take it to Borough Board. CB1 is, I think, will be taking it, it sounds like, but we'll try to figure out how to do it.
All right, so Jesse, I'm going to need some help on figuring out who to address the letter to.
Yeah, we can figure that out. That's fine.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Paul, for taking that. We'll move on to agenda item number 3. Yes, which is, sorry, I just got a text from Jessica, which is a letter to OGS and ESD regarding Chelsea Bayview Building at, as we all know, 550 West 20th Street, to ask them to, as we discussed when we were creating the letter for the RFP itself, that we wanted to make sure that they do not wait for the person who wins the RFP to have to replace the terracotta plaques at Bayview. This was a letter, there was a letter that was sent by Senator Hoylman, and this is a letter in support that we are also asking them to take care of this problem now and not let it linger. Dave wrote the letter. There's been one friendly amendment to strike a sentence that we do not agree with claims that there was an overriding public safety concern. So we are fine to do that. If Dave, if you're fine to do that. And otherwise, we all sort of, we've discussed this at length. If anyone has any questions, we're happy to take them. I'll let David answer them, but hopefully we're all on board to just vote on this to move forward.
So just to be clear, we're striking a sentence that would say we don't agree with claims that there was an overriding safety concern.
Yes.
Could we discuss that at all?
Yes. That was a friendly amendment that we got today.
Uh-huh. I think it's important not to let the state off the hook on this. You know, one of the reasons for asking them to take care of it rather than put it off on the RFE winner or request for proposals winner is that they really should have made this part of their project to begin with. And I think this notion of, well, it was our idea all along to put it on the RFP winner is something that they came up with to cover themselves.
Sorry,
and you know, that it's partly trying to make them accountable. That's part of what the motivation of our argument is. The other one is that who knows when, you know, an RFP winner is going to be found. And it could end up going the way of NOLO, and we could be 8 years down the road. And I think the longer this goes without the terracotta being put back, the higher the risk that it will never be put back. And I was just.
Can I respond? Yeah. So I support your letter. I support it. I think that the language, just that one sentence about the intention, like we don't know whether we really don't know whether there was a public safety issue or not. And I think that the issue with the one sentence is that there is, it's just confrontational, and we do not have the actual evidence to like make a claim like that. So I don't think it matters. I don't think it hurts the letter not to have that. I think that we have written letters on this already. Our senator has written letters on this. You know, the board is fully behind this. It's in the RFP document. We agreed before that we would parallel path, right? That we would make sure it's in the RFP so that if they don't do anything for 8 years, it doesn't get forgotten. But now we're going to double down and say, you need to do it now. So I fully support this letter. And I'm okay with making sure that we don't put any language in there that makes our position vulnerable. Like, I don't want them to pull that sentence out and be able to say that's what their response is about. We've already had that letter from OGS.
All right, I'll let others speak.
Thank you, though. Thank you. And thank you for writing this, Dave. Thank you. Pamela?
Yeah, well, obviously I support David's position, and I think that sentence should definitely be left in the letter. It was very clear and very obvious to all that as soon as the sidewalk structure was put in place, there was no more emergency, and yet they powered on through how many more of the plaques. That was entirely unnecessary and clearly was driven by some motive other than safety. I think it's important that we we make it clear that we're all aware of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Pamela. Paul?
Yeah, I also am totally in support of this letter. I think given the fact that so much work has gone into us calling for in-kind replacement of the terracotta pieces, and that in fact this component was debated as part of the Bayview letter we sent, and we did not include this language in that specific letter from the board that we had said we would do a separate track on that and that we would bring this forward as a separate issue. So I'm glad that this has come back up and is being pushed forward. I think that the letter, that sentence in the letter that talks about we cannot confirm public safety issues, it even was written in a parenthetical clause. And I think that language is too confrontational. We are not engineers. We did not go on site. We did not investigate. We did not align it. And I don't think it detracts from the value of the letter to remove that sentence. And I think this letter is critically important. And I would hate to have even a sentence in there that causes any unnecessary confrontation.
Thanks, Paul. I just want to say again, I went back and I read our first letter, then I read OGS response, and they latch on to this idea that there was in fact a safety concern to then just deflect. And I feel like I didn't necessarily, it wasn't my friendly amendment, but having heard it and then going back and looking at them, I do feel like they'll latch on to this and to just be able to say like, there was a safety concern, thank you very much, and not really address the issue that we're asking for, which is that they replace the terracotta plaques. So I want to know, Dave, if you're okay with removing that line, and if so, maybe we can just move to a vote if no one else has anything to say. I'm definitely trying to speed things along, but I think that there's support. You're on mute, Dave.
I'd like to hear how others think before stating my opinion.
Okay. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this?
I mean, could we have
Betty?
just a show of hands of how people are leaning? Betty?
Betty raised her hand. You're on mute, Betty.
I said, maybe there's sort of a compromise of softening the statement so it's not just bang, bang, bang. Like it could be something like it's problematic whether it's a public safety or it's unproven that it was a public safety issue. Some sort of softening language. That's what I have to say.
Thanks, Betty. Mike?
Well, I was thinking along the same lines. You can cushion that statement, massage it a bit, and still get the idea across that we're aware of what's going on. I mean, that's what you want to say, right? And not pretend that it never existed in the first place.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you feel about that, Dave? You want to just take a look at that sentence again and just see if we can. I just don't want them to be the reason why they ignore the real, intent of the letter, which is to get the plaques replaced.
The letter is in Dropbox, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm just looking right now.
I mean, there's always a way to make something less confrontational. I guess passive aggressive is the way you do it, right?
Okay, the line before does say that it was inappropriately removed without required SHPO involvement, and that will remain, right?
Yes.
Okay. Given that, I think I would be good with it. Just while we're on the subject, and I know everyone would like to get out of here, but I was looking closely at the replacement brick today. And Jesse, do you have one of the images that I sent you earlier? I just think it's something of which we should be aware.
While he's pulling that up, Pamela, do you want to say one more thing?
Yes, I'm interested to hear, to see where David's going with that, because when we first looked at it, we looked at the replacement brick and it did not look like anybody's idea of a temporary fix. It looked like the plan is to do that, and that's it's patterned, and I think that's maybe what David's talking about, but we'll see. Anyway,
just so everyone's clear, does this have anything to do with the letter itself?
Well, it might simply reinforce the inappropriate part that we've already got in there. But if we could go to the replacement image, yeah, you've got it right there. And Jesse, if you look at the brick, you can actually see that there is a pattern to the brick, and there are two different colors, and it's kind of diagonal, and it's meant, I think, to be like camouflage. For the missing terracotta, because it's more patterned than the rest, and it actually costs more money to put in multicolored bricks in a pattern like this. So I don't think ESD ever had any intention to replace the terracotta. And just so everyone is aware, they ought to have contacted SHPO first.
Right.
And yet they very deliberately did this, even as they were removing more terracotta, and they had plenty of time without any emergency issue to have brought SHPO in, and SHPO would have preserved more of the intact terracotta pieces for reuse. So we got it right. That's all I'm saying. And
I understand.
More power to the letter.
Yeah, exactly. Agree with you. I think we have some electeds on our side, and now's the right time to just reiterate the letter that we've sent a few months ago, that this is totally inappropriate, and now say that they need to fix it now, and they need to fix it with terracotta, and that we're watching. So I think that's what this letter does, and I'm in support.
Good by me.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
Move to adopt the letter with the amended change. Thank you.
Is there a second? Viren? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Present not eligible? Abstaining? The motion passes. So Dave, if you don't mind, we'll just take that sentence out, or if you want to massage it, just let me know later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Awesome. Moving on to agenda item number 4. Andrew Berman is here to present an LPC request for evaluation of the Church of the Lady of Guadalupe, 229 to 231 West 14th. Thank you so much for waiting so long, Andrew. We really appreciate it. If you would like to present your letter and just a brief synopsis of it, and because it is in the Dropbox, and I think the intention tonight is that we hear this, and that if we agree, we support this by writing our own letter and submitting it to full board. So thanks, Andrew.
Thanks very much for having me. So yeah, I don't need to get into greater depth than necessary. If you've all seen the letter, there's not a ton more that I would add beyond what's in there. But in summary, the building is probably imminently endangered because of the decree of relegation, which came down. The building is incredibly historically significant. It was New York's very first church for a Spanish-speaking congregation. It was the church began there in 1902. The current facade dates to a later renovation of the properties around 1923, 24, I believe. But it's really incredibly important to think about the fact that prior to this church, there was no church in New York City which served a congregation predominantly of people from the Spanish-speaking world. And right from the very beginning, Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is the patron saint of Mexico, was intended to serve not just the Spanish community, which there was a great concentration of in this part of the upper western part of Greenwich Village and lower Chelsea, but also the broader Latin American community in New York City. Now, both of those communities were pretty small, relatively speaking, at the time within the context of the city of New York. But of course, that community grew over time to now where people whose origins lie in the Spanish-speaking world in Latin America make up about 30% of the population of New York City and are the largest single ethnic group in New York City. New York has the largest Latino, Latina, Latinx, whatever term you want to use, population of any city in the country. And this was the very first church established to serve that community. It was, I guess, about 15 or so years ago that the church, that the Archdiocese of New York first merged that congregation with St. Bernard's on the south side of 14th Street, a block further west. And now they're seeking to sell off the property, which will, or I should say, at least at the moment, they're just seeking to make it no longer a church, which probably means they will sell it off. And the building likely won't survive. So for this building to be destroyed would really be a shame. It would be it's an incredibly important part of the neighborhood's history, of the city's history. There are incredibly few landmarks in New York that specifically honor and preserve the Hispanic heritage of New York City, in spite of what an incredibly large segment of the city's population that is. And this would certainly be a really important place to start. So those are the broad outlines. I thought we would have it by tonight, hopefully by no later than tomorrow. We'll have a letter of support from all of the local elected officials, Councilmember Eric Botcher, Assemblymember Tony Simone, State Senator Brian Kavanaugh, I believe Borough President Mark Levine have all already said that they're supporting it, and they're jointly putting together a letter. And we hope and expect to get support from a lot of other organizations and groups that care about the kind of history embodied in this site. And it would be wonderful to have Community Boards 4's support as well.
Thank you
I'm
so
happy to
much.
answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I have one question. What is it? Is it currently acting as a church? Because it's a bit hard to tell. Like, it looks like a residential / church front, but residential. So do you know what it is right now?
Right. Well, the reason why it looks residential is because it was actually originally built as 2 houses. And, as discussed in the RFE, the houses were owned by the Delmonico family, which is an incredibly prominent New York City family. And by the way, I should also mention, as if, the reasons I gave weren't enough, but the historic significance also relates to that this church played a really important role in Dorothy Day's life. She was very much connected to the church and in her sort of transformation. My understanding is that it has not been used as the primary place of worship for the congregation for some time, but it is still owned by the church. So I think whatever is going on in there is church related, but my sense is there has not been a lot of activity in the building for quite some time. Other people may have more information on that, but it's still under church ownership and operation.
Thank you. I also just want to remind everybody that, LPC has their diversity initiative, which it surely sounds like this would fall under, much like former colored school number 4, which we've been working on for some time. So I, for one, fully support this. Paul?
Thanks, Andrew. Great to see you. Great work on this. Very impressive compilation of information here. We're trying to, in Hell's Kitchen, also fighting to get St. Benedict the Moor landmarked as the first African-American church of the area. And we have applied, I think we've gone through some applications with that church in the past. Has this church ever applied? Is this the first time it's been asked to be landmarked, or is there a history of this that should be included as well to say, this was applied for in previous years, it wasn't done, it was rejected, whatever?
As far as I know, I can't say it with 100% authority. I'm not aware of any other request for evaluation for this church previously. So I think it's the first time that it's being considered. And of course, now it is facing this immediate threat. By the way, as a sidebar, as you probably know, St. Benedict the Moor moved from Greenwich Village up to 54th Street. We have a lot of information about the origins of that congregation. We'd be happy to share it with Community Board 4 if it would be helpful to you.
Absolutely. Let's connect on that sometime, Andrew. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
And by the way, I'm in support of this letter. Just in
Thanks,
case.
Paul. Thank you. Betty?
Yes, and thank you, Andrew, for such a lively, interesting background on this church. It educated me a lot. I'm a bit confused. The owner is the church, the Catholic Church. Is that right?
The Archdiocese of New York.
Yeah. Okay. So, I don't understand if they own it and they want to make it not a church anymore. Is that right?
Yes, that's the decree of relegation.
Okay. So what can stop them as an owner from doing that?
So absolutely nothing can stop a church from no longer being a church. As you can imagine, in our system of separation of church and state, there is no law that can force a building to be a church or not be a church. So that we can't do. The only thing we can do is ensure that the building is not destroyed. What its future use would then be an open question. I will say this, though. I do think that if the building is landmarked, it might make the church a little less likely to try to sell it. But it certainly wouldn't prevent them from doing it, and it wouldn't be a guarantee of that.
I see. I mean, I'm somehow the vision of the church that's on West 4th Street, which was a church, and I guess it got unchurched and is now a residential condo or something. You're probably familiar with what I see. So the goal is that a landmarking would discourage maybe the Catholic diocese from selling it or de-churching it. Is that the idea?
Well, it's possible. I mean, if nothing else, it would ensure that that building remains intact so that no matter what happens, this place, which has this, remarkable history in the city of New York, would always be there. I wish I could say that there was a way of ensuring in perpetuity that the building would be, used as a church to serve this congregation, etc. There's no legal way of doing that. There's no legal mechanism that exists to force the church's hand in that way.
I think the goal, Betty, is if the church sells the property, that it does not get torn down and, turned into something else.
Okay, I get it. Thank you for the clarification. I'm in support of the letter.
Thanks, Betty. Pamela?
Wearing another hat, I just wanted to say that Save Chelsea has written a letter of support for this to our electeds recently. And yes, those two buildings that make up the church were townhouses built in, I think, 1850. Am I right, Andrew? There's quite a lot of history in them before they became the church. There may be an update on that. I'll drop a hint having to do with a relative of mine. I've said enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Pamela. Jessica?
Yeah, I just, can't make a motion, but I want to add my support to this letter. I also just wanted to call out very briefly that if you did not read the decree on the relegation, which is linked in the first line of the letter, so you don't even have to dig for it, just click right there. I highly encourage it. It's there for those of us who don't typically read church documents. It is really something very unique. So I encourage everyone to do that.
Very unique and very confusing as
I had to read it out loud.
As the
I
Irish
freaking loved
Catholic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would love to see us approve this and hopefully we can entertain a motion on this now.
Thanks, David. Do you want to make a motion, Dave?
I will, but first I just want to make sure that we thank Andrew. I mean, this church is not in the village, it's in Chelsea. He went beyond his boundaries. And it's, it certainly should be a landmark. The only thing that I'm unhappy about is how long it takes the Landmarks Commission to consider these things. We're all excited that Colored School number 4 is finally calendared. It should not have taken 4 years. And this church will remain at risk until it is calendared. And Andrew, maybe, can you tell us about any initiative there may be to try to compel the Landmarks Commission to review these in a more timely fashion, or how we might create one?
Well, I think the most important thing is to have support from the community board, hopefully from all elected officials. We're definitely hoping to build a broad coalition to pressure the commission to act swiftly before it's too late. As was referenced before, several years ago, the commission came out with this, what they call equity framework, where they claim that they are going to be making a priority to ensure that the commission's designations reflect the diversity of the city, the diversity of our histories. It's been a lot of talk. There's been a little bit of action, but not a lot. I think we have a very strong case to make that it would fly in the face of that commitment that they made to the city of New York if they don't act on this. So while there's no guarantees, and the commission is always very, very hesitant to take on the Archdiocese of New York, I think we would have a very, very, very strong case here to push them to act and not allow this to slip through their fingers.
I can speak to. Thank you, Dave. I can speak to I can make an educated guess that former Colored School number 4 is moving at a rapid clip because of all the press that Eric Washington has been able to garner. And I do not think that it would be moving as fast without that. He is literally in some publication every week. At least every month, and not, some small and some not small. So I don't know if there's any opportunity for us to help you get some press on this. We'd be happy to. But anyway, let's entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, but I'd also like to propose that it does include something, asking the Landmarks Commission to act in a more timely fashion. It shouldn't have been 9 years for Bayview. Not that we necessarily want to bring that up again, but yeah, I would absolutely support this request for evaluation.
Great.
Anyone second?
Is there a second?
Second.
Everyone seconding. All in favor? Thanks, Pamela.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Present not eligible? Abstaining? I just thought of what present not eligible might mean, that you might work for the Archdiocese. Great. Thank you, Andrew. We're going to write a letter in support, and we're going to include the overall sentiment that we need to move on these things faster, and include that this should be part of the equity framework and therefore, moved up in consideration. And we'll send an extra separate email to Sonia Guire, who we do now and again, to try to expedite this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew.
I've lost my place. That is our Jessica. Do you want? So we've been just started working on the conversations around a zoning text amendment for Chelsea Historic District, as we've all discussed and was discussed at full board, regarding, you know, single family townhouses that are expanding upwards and backwards. And we're going to just give you a quick update, but I think Jessica's going to do that.
Sure, this will be actually very brief, but as Carrie mentioned, you know, tonight we are not hearing anything about a row house in the 20s, but I'm sure next meeting we will, or the one after. And so to better prepare us and create a more consistent set of recommendations as it relates to those row houses, we propose. So I think it was suggested that we consider text amendments, but I think it also just led us to this place of saying, how can we really put our heads together to think about what are the opportunities for us to more consistently message to applicants about this, and what levers are there available for us as we think about protecting these areas. And so the working, we're not even calling it a working group, but some of us put our heads together on this. If you're interested, you are welcome to join us. Just let us know. You can raise your hand now or send us a note. But to just begin thinking through some of the strategies related to this, as well as looking at what other special districts have done across the city to bring their own resources together. So not necessarily a text amendment, but just you know, different models of ensuring that we protect these historic districts. And so we've just had one initial brainstorm, again, with text amendment being an ideal, potentially not even ideal, a potential silver bullet, but there are also concerns with that. And so we're looking at other opportunities, including the West 20s, which did a homeowners agreement, sort of a gentleman's agreement, if you will, and other strategies that might be available to us. So we are going to have some additional calls this week to think these things through, and we'll look forward to, you know, determining a more clear strategy along to support this, and we'll look forward to briefing you. And again, if anyone's interested in joining these conversations, please let us know, but it is with the goal of having a more consistent approach to dealing with the requests as they continue to come to us.
Paul?
Can I just ask a question about, I mean, what we just went through with the POPs zoning text amendment, it was, you know, multiple community boards all engaged in a working group. Is this something that we're doing just amongst ourselves for better messaging on West Chelsea, or is there talk of a zoning text amendment to address historic districts across the city?
That's a good question. I mean, one of the things we started to look into is Dave mentioned that certain areas across the city have different FARs, and how did that come to be and why? And so I think it's premature to say that just yet, but obviously if we were looking for something that really would be a citywide approach, I would think it would make sense to try to get feedback from other boards across the city as we look to both better understand what's possible and also how that's actually potentially meaningfully addressed the issues in those districts. I mean, I think the answer is we're not there yet, but that would certainly be something that we should consider as we move forward.
So it's at this point, it's just an internal MCB4 discussion. It hasn't gone larger than that yet. And the reason I raise that is because, you know, once again, we're at budget cycle, and once again, the residential FAR of 12 cap at the state level is being considered as part of the state budget, and we're going to run into that again. And, you know, to protect historic districts, we have talked in the past about, you know, setting FAR caps at 3 or something like that. And you mentioned other districts have different FARs in their historic districts. And that might help drive an impetus to get other boards involved in this, have a collective viewpoint across the city on that.
Yeah, I really think it's a great point. I do think there's a lot more I think we're at the very tippy top of this iceberg. And, you know, I'm glad we're starting. But I think we still have a lot we need to learn to be able to chart next steps.
If there aren't any other questions, we'll definitely continue to report on our progress with this. We have a couple quick announcements. Very happy to announce that, as was kind of the surprise was blown, but there was an LPC hearing where former colored school number 4 was advanced to by unanimous vote to the next step, which is a public hearing in the coming months, was what they said. So we don't have a date for that, but we'll certainly be watching. And that's excellent news. As well as, we are amending the LPC checklist based on some feedback from the committee. So you'll see a new sort of section number 1, which is about a nice synopsis of what the project is. So we don't have to try to dig through the whole thing to figure out what exactly we're looking at. Thank you, Betty. And Viren, we know you've been really working very hard on the commercial conversion, and you went to a meeting that maybe you can just give us a quick update about, and then we can call it a night.
Oh, you're talking about the 5-borough housing plan?
Yes, sorry, was it not commercial conversion?
It was, but Paul was there as well for this meeting. It's a group that's kind of an advocacy group that's trying to make a case for commercial conversions, only office spaces, not commercial as retail or hotels, just office spaces conversion. And they have a pretty comprehensive plan, pretty similar to what we put together from CLU with the FCNY study that we did a while ago. Little more extensive, broader scope, because they're reaching out to state, and primarily they want to raise the cap from 12 FAR to higher. They have a bunch of income levels which do not exactly match, and Paul can speak more to that in terms of what is defined as middle class in CB4 versus middle class in other districts. There's a kind of big gap between how that gets defined. So middle income, moderate income, and low income. And those definitions do not pan out equally across all districts in Manhattan. We know that, in New York City, and we know that. They are saying that this, for now, it is the low-hanging fruit, and we want to just get this hurdle passed, and then we'll get into the weeds of things later on, and then sort of citywide issues would actually vary from whatever the state decides to do. But they just want to get this in before this. What is the budget deadline, Paul? I don't remember exactly.
April 1st.
Say it again, sorry.
April 1st is the budget deadline.
Right. So they basically are going around all different community boards and asking questions and asking for recommendations. And Paul, we kind of verbally gave a bunch of recommendations. Are we supposed to give something in writing, or we are not?
I don't recall that we're going to give them in writing, but we were very clear with them that across the city, for them to change the multi-dwelling law and to incorporate AMI bans of 40% to 100% is certainly far below what we want. But he did point out that in places like the Bronx and Harlem, they don't want higher income bans than we do. And so it was a little bone of contention we picked up. Jesse, you're raising your hand like you had something to add to this.
Yeah, and if I'm wrong, I can certainly make.
You're not wrong. I can tell in advance.
I believe what we agreed, that we did think it would be a good idea for them to come to committee, though, both into Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use and to Chelsea, and that if there was enough of consensus around some general recommendation with I think you're both right, there were a number of conditions or suggestions that were made, or potential conditions and suggestions that were made at the briefing that would probably be no surprise to both committees, that then the idea would be possibly getting something out before at through exec because of the timing of the budget, to be able to give some level of guidance that where we would fall out on this proposal.
Yes. Jesse, did he, Mr. Sanchez, did he ever give us his presentation, or he just showed us online?
I think he just showed us online because that's the first time I saw it. So I will follow up. I think
it would be a good idea to get, if we get our hands on it, it's pretty comprehensive, and I was quite impressed in terms of, the things that he covered. I think it was pretty well put together. Of course, there are differences between different districts, and I think it would be good for us to sort of scan through it, even if it is just gets given to the leadership of committees and the board. I think that should be a good start. That was just a statement, not a question.
Well, I just want to make sure are we still comfortable with that idea? Paul, I looked at Jessica and Carrie for March's clue, and I'm looking to Paul for March's Clinton Hell's Kitchen land use.
Sorry, dog. Yes, I think we should do that.
Paul?
Yes.
Okay.
So it'll go through Chelsea land use, Hell's Kitchen land use, and HHHS. And then exec will write the letter and board will ratify.
I think for everybody's sanity's sake, if it's okay, I think just because we felt comfortable with putting it to the two land use committees because it's predominantly land use based, and I'm happy to invite HHHS to those two committees. And if members of that committee have anything to say, they can definitely voice those concerns.
Well, the chair is on, one of the chairs of housing is on.
One of the co-chairs is on Paul's committee, so.
And we'll discuss tomorrow at exec.
And you'll be discussing it tomorrow at exec. Right.
Yeah, I think we should just think about how we coordinate, and if we want to do an update several of us here, Debbie, myself, are on housing. So just how we close that loop. Sorry, Bjorn, also, just, how we close that loop and make sure we're communicating before and after.
Jesse, one quick question. I don't know if you have that FCNY report handy or not. If not, I can resend it to you, and then whoever doesn't have it, you can share it.
I'm almost certain we have it, but obviously I don't have it. I don't have it at my fingertips right now, but I'm happy.
I'll email it to you.
Okay, I'm happy to send that around too.
It'll be good for us to see because our report actually has a few more details about our own district.
Sure.
And the other presentation is sort of,
sure.
wrong. So this will definitely have to compare.
Sure.
Thank you. Great. So I think that's it for tonight. Unless I missed anything. I'm just checking my
Motion to
notes.
adjourn.
Second.
I just have a quick question for Jesse.
Go ahead, Pamela.
Are you aware, Jesse, there's a large spider on the wall behind you?
Joking?
No. Anybody else? Jesse, get your
Bye, everyone.
Get yourself full image up there. Yes.
That's a plan.
That's a spider if I ever saw one.
Thanks, everybody.
Thought we could end
Concerned about me, Pam. I appreciate the concern.
Buonasera. Buonasera.
Good night.
Take care.
Good night.
Stay healthy.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.